when communicating with people who are outside our fields, we need to be a translator. Jargon is death to communicating value.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Mars Discovery District and welcome back to Entrepreneurship 101. For those of you joining us for the first time, this is our value proposition lecture, which is lecture number 6 in our series. Warm welcome to our webcast participants as well, including our satellite center partners who are joining us from all over Ontario. Just a few announcements before we get going and before I introduce our speaker for this evening, Joe Wilson, who is the Senior Strategist with the Education Technology Cluster here at Mars. If you are interested in resources related to each lecture, by Monday morning, Monday afternoon, slides, the blog from the lecture, as well as the video are up and available on the website, on the Mars website. And we will send, for those of you who are registered, we will send an email with the links for all of those lectures as well. Next week's lecture is on product development, and there are a few changes with that lecture. We have Chris Eben. Most of you who are accustomed to Entrepreneurship 101 are familiar with Steve Karkner, who has been here year after year faithfully. Next week, we're going to have Chris Eben, who is the managing partner for the working group, or TWG. We're very excited to have him. He'll bring a very different perspective, but nonetheless, the insights will be extremely valuable to all of you who are interested in product development. And another thing that's very different about that lecture, we will not be here in the auditorium. We will be in phase 2, which is a little bit different. I don't think we've been in phase 2 since E101 started many years ago. But we will, just for that lecture, we will be in the multipurpose room. We will have staff, Mars staff down here to guide you to the multipurpose room for those of you who are not familiar with the entire Mars facility. So not to worry, we'll have human signage and poster boards available so you can find your way. Another thing that's quite different about next week's lecture is that we'll have a techno showcase put on by the Impact Center at U of T. And they'll be in the Mars atrium, both the atrium here in phase 1 as well as phase 2, and they'll be here from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Next week, Wednesday, showcasing products from students at U of T. Maybe 40 students or so will have their products available. So I think it's a really great complement to the lecture next week because you'll get to see firsthand and speak to some of the students who have created the products, what their own process has been. So I think it's a really great complement. So if you want to come early, because they start at 3 o'clock, so if you'd like to come before the Entrepreneurship 101 lecture or hang around after the lecture to see some of the products that are available, they've actually extended the time of the showcase to accommodate all of you, which I think is fantastic. The event is free. Again, it's here in the Mars atrium next week. Another exciting event that we have coming up is Walter Isaacson's lecture on his new book called The Innovators. If you're not familiar with his work, he wrote the book on Steve Jobs, a biography on Steve Jobs. And I am halfway through his book, The Innovators, and it is fantastic. The insights and the learnings from that are really great. Key to that, the core messaging, some of the core messaging behind that is the importance of collaboration and learning to work with a team. But what's also very important from the book is just the value of interdisciplinary thinking in innovation and how that's contributed to the digital revolution. And he speaks to that largely through just the biographies and the stories of multiple innovators across many years, across many decades, actually. So that's going to be very valuable. The tickets are about $20. It's next week, Monday evening at 6 p.m. here in the auditorium. And the copies of the book will be available in the lower concourse, which is right out here. And Indigo will be selling those. So you can get the copies of the book, have Walter sign them, because he will be doing a book signing at the end of the event. And that's going to be pretty good. So this evening we have Joe Wilson, who is the Senior Strategist for the Education Technology Cluster. He's also an education advisor here with our Mars Information Communications and Technologies Venture Services Group. Before I introduce Joe, who's going to speak to value proposition, take a minute to introduce yourself to the person who is sitting next to you and tell that person what value you bring to your company or to your startup. You have 1 minute. So Joe Wilson works as an education advisor here at Mars. and works with education technology entrepreneurs. He develops the Entrepreneurs Toolkit Workshop series, which is part of the educational program. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Toolkit Workshops, if you're rearing and ready to go with your business idea, that is a very intensive program where you get to work on your business while you're working in your business effectively. So all the deliverables for any segment in the series comes with is about your business plan, your marketing plan, that kind of thing. So Joe was very instrumental in developing that, and now he consults on a wide range of educational programming. He writes on topics of science, culture, and city issues for Now Magazine, The Globe and Mail, Spacing, and Young Street. He has edited 2 books and written many academic papers in astronomy, education, entrepreneurship, and innovation strategies. He has also appeared on City TV, the Space Network, CBC, CTV, and Talk TV. That's all the formalities that I got from Joe as far as his bio is concerned. I've had the pleasure of working with Joe because he also developed the Future Leaders program. And I know firsthand that he's really smart, very, very entrepreneurial, and it's always a pleasure to work with him. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
So good evening. It's good to see everybody. It's great to see this program growing and growing. Is this 10 years now? 10 years, and this started as a partnership with U of T with just a handful of people linked to that techno showcase you're going to see next week. And it reached almost 30,000 people last year through all the webcasts and all the videos. So it's exciting to be here and to kind of share some of this stuff with you. This topic of the value proposition is kind of a core piece of your business and a core piece of what you're going to be bringing into the world if you're starting a business. What I'm going to be doing is talking a little bit about what it is, giving you a ton of examples, and then I'm going to go through what the value proposition is not and explain how it can be used. There's kind of a marketing angle on this. You'll see some terms here that you recognize: mission statement, elevator pitch, positioning statement. These words sometimes get interchanged, so I'm going to try and kind of disentangle those for you. They all, though, have their root in the value proposition. The value proposition is the core thesis that runs these other pieces. A lot of this stuff can be done. I mean, I would encourage you to scribble notes, and there's a slide coming up where I'm actually going to pause and get you to write some stuff. But a lot of what I'm going to say and a structure for writing out your own value proposition can be found in this workbook, which is on the Entrepreneur's Toolkit online. And I would encourage you to just download it, work through some of the activities, and then test those activities in a real situation with your company, or at least with your idea. When we are communicating with people who are outside our fields, we need to be a translator. We need to take the thing we've been working on, translate it into language that everybody understands, and then present it out to the world. Jargon is death to communicating value. We want to stay away from jargon in our field as much as possible and just use simple, clear language to describe what it is we're doing. And I'll give you some tips on how to do that in a minute. One other word on language before we jump into some examples is that there's a rule in writing where you show, don't tell, right? You don't want to explain to the reader exactly how they're supposed to feel or what's happening. You just want to show them scenes. You want to show them what's happening, and then they draw their own conclusions. It's the same in pitching, and it's the same in describing value of an idea or of a business. You don't want to use words that lead the person to a presupposed conclusion. They should come to that conclusion on their own by the strength of your offering. These are overused words that often get used, especially in marketing copy, but they don't really mean anything. What you need to do is show what the value is so that it is self-evident to that person. You don't need to tell them that something is cutting edge. Describe what it is you're doing that's cutting edge, and they'll realize that's cutting edge. You don't need to tell somebody that something is innovative. You just need to show them what it is that's innovative about your business model or about your offering. So beware of jargon. So here is the kind of textbook definition, and we'll dig into exactly what this means. It's a statement. It's a one sentence, ideally, sometimes two, ideally one sentence, that describes the unique benefits of your thing as they get delivered to a target audience. So it's a sentence, and it's deceptively simple to write that sentence, but there's a lot of work that goes into crafting it. There's a lot of work that goes into messaging, and you'll change it a lot, right? Early startups are not just small versions of large companies. They are essentially an organization that exists to test this hypothesis, to test that value proposition with a bunch of different people and to see if it resonates. And if you are iterating, if you're pivoting well as an early startup, this will change weekly. This will change upon every interview you have with a customer. One way of thinking about a value proposition sentence is to think about it in terms of something we already know, which is the English essay from high school. In grade 9, you got told that, you know, when you're writing your English essay, you need to have a thesis right there in the opening paragraph. You know, often you'd bold it or underline it, and it was understood that the rest of the essay was going to support that one contention, that one sentence. You know, all your kind of point-proof comment in your paragraphs, your conclusion, everything was going back to that one sentence. That's how I want you to think about the value proposition. It's a thesis. Very close to that, etymologically as well as kind of metaphorically, is the hypothesis, the hypothesis in a scientific process. So the value proposition is also, you can think of it like a hypothesis. It's one sentence that you need to test to see if it's true or not. You say, I've got this thing, it's bringing you these following values, then I need to test if that's true. And if it's true, then it's likely that you'll pay me for it. If it's not true, then I need to go back and revisit my hypothesis. So the irony of that first video is that, I mean, a lot of the work Mars does is working with scientists who have discovered something in a lab and then need to translate that into kind of the marketplace and figure out what the value is in a marketplace, not just in a lab setting. One of the ironies is that once the scientists, people with a scientific background, understand it this way, often they really like the process of startup because it's little iterations of the scientific process. You're testing hypotheses every month, you know, every week you're testing something new. Instead of that lab being, you know, a closed lab where you've got, pipettes and test tubes and all the machinery that scientists have, your lab is people. Your lab is a marketplace. Your lab is real customer interviews and real customer feedback. And that's the kind of feedback, that's the kind of data we want to collect to prove or disprove a value proposition. The sentence has 3 things in it. It sounds so obvious, but it's useful to have a structure around this because otherwise it gets confusing. What is it? I can't tell you how many people try to just explain their business to me, and then I'm like, yeah, but what is it? What is the thing? Is it a service? Is it a product? Is it an app? Is it a platform that exists online? And we don't mean what's the name of the product, because that might not be very explanatory. We mean, like, what's the product category? What does it fit into? You know, you got to link it to something people know. Often people will say, well, my product doesn't even exist yet. It's a whole new category. It's so innovative. It's so new. That's not a good thing, because you don't have anything in the customer's mind to refer to, right? People only remember things and understand things by linking them to things that are previously in their brains. So if you have a totally new thing that there's no reference point for a customer, it's really hard for them to understand what it is you're doing. So even if it's truly new and innovative, we say link it to something that exists already. Once you've got your foot in the door, then you can show them all the innovative features and how it really expands their worldview. Number 2, a target customer. I can't emphasize this enough. So many people come in and say, everybody will want this. This will change the world. That might be true in 10 years or 20 years. It might have groundbreaking impact, but you have to start somewhere. And you have to start with a particular niche market. A group of people who all think the same way, that can all understand and all nod their heads when you describe it to them. They tell their friends, word grows, and then, once you've made some money or once you've really validated that there's value here, you earn the right to go on to another niche and expand and expand and expand. Sometimes they call this the beachhead market. You know, you cross the channel, you establish a beachhead, and then you slowly work out. If you're trying to tackle all markets all at once, your value proposition will be diluted because your value is so many different things to so many different people. The third piece here is the value you provide to people. One of the common mistakes people make is to start listing their features, listing the features of the service or the product they have. Features are not values. Values are things that we internalize. Values are things that kind of keep us up at night with worry. All these three things should combine to create something that is completely unique in the marketplace. If you list your value proposition and that value proposition could just equally as apply to another company, another startup, or another established company, then it's not different enough. And there's really no reason for you to be in a market. Something should be unique about the emergent property is unique, to kind of use the scientific term. So let's just go through some examples. I'll use some nice clear language. By the way, these are my examples. These are not like official in any way of these companies, but I've picked some companies that you might recognize. So on the right, I've got a description of winners. This is a bad description of winners. This is a description of winners that is on their website, but it's buried under layers of FAQs. And this is more of an answer to the question, like, what's your unique business model that allows you to offer, clothes at such a deep discount? So Winners is an off-price department store owned by TJX that employs international sourcing and buying power. There's information in that sentence, but it's not particularly valuable for me as a consumer. So here is one sentence that summarizes, I think, the value of Winners, or one of the values of Winners. So Winners is a department store that offers fashion-conscious consumers the latest brand names for up to 60% off. There's no jargon in there. There's no leading language like innovative or cutting edge or super-duper exciting. And here are these three components I talked about. What is it? It's a department store. For whom? Who's the target market? Here we've listed fashion-conscious consumers. So this is a specific subset of people who are shopping for clothes that are conscious of the fashion and the logos they wear. The values, status, with up to latest brand names, and saving money, up to 60% off. Okay, so those are two values there listed. Let's take another one. Oh, this is our chemical isomer friend. By the way, this is based on a real guy we met at a workshop we were doing 3 years ago now. And it took him a long time to get out of the pattern of explaining things in scientific jargon. When he finally explained what this little isomer did, we were blown away. It was really cool. So the good version we finally came up with, I'm paraphrasing here, is A1 Industries has developed an economical and easy-to-use chemical additive that allows paint manufacturing companies to reduce the environmental impacts of their products. So this thing he had invented, this little chemical additive, this was something you just added in the production line for something toxic like paint, and it immediately reduced the kind of harmful off-gassing and stuff like that. And we were like, that's amazing. Why didn't you say that at the beginning? And he would say, I did say that. I said, I've developed a chemical isomer that wraps volatile organic compounds and blah, blah, blah. He didn't recognize that he was saying the same thing in two different languages. This is what we need to see, though, to communicate the value. So what is it? It's a chemical additive. Whether it's an isomer or a molecule or whatever, it doesn't really matter to the end user. They just need to know it's something they add in. For whom? Paint manufacturing companies. And this was something we had to push them on too, because of course this thing can be added into the production line of like anything made of plastic or of a number of different bug spray. You can add it into lots of different things and it makes them less harmful in terms of the chemical emissions. But we had to push them and say, you can't just launch this to the whole world. You have to pick an industry to launch in. He can use pretty much the same value proposition for, say, bug spray manufacturers or plastic chair manufacturers. He just has to substitute the little blue clause there. The values here are that it's fairly low cost. These things were like pennies per drop. It's easy to use, right? It doesn't require a rejigging of your entire manufacturing plant. You just have to add it at one stage in this cycle. And it reduces the environmental impact of the products, which of course has a number of different trickle-down effects that is of interest to, say, paint manufacturing companies. Here's a company you might know. So Google uses a patented page ranking algorithm to make money through ad placements. That's a true statement. There's nothing false about that, but it doesn't really tell you much about what value they bring. So this is a value proposition that applies not to the whole company of Google, because that would take years to itemize everything they do, but specifically to the search engine. Google is the world's largest search engine that allows internet users to find relevant information quickly and easily. So what is it? It's a search engine. For whom? Internet users. Now, that's fairly broad. If they were coming into Mars and saying that we're launching this company, we would encourage them to pick a niche of internet users who were looking for a specific kind of thing that they could own and then build outwards. Values, relevance, speed, and ease of use. Those are three things that you can highlight. Ease of use is a big one. I can't imagine how much the real estate on Google's front page is worth if an ad company wanted to put an ad there. But they're not going to do it because one of Google's core values is the nice, clean, clear front page. There's a box, and you type stuff in and hit enter, and you go. If they clutter that up and they start to mess with their value, their core value, they're going to confuse their customers, and they're going to alienate people. One quick point here on the end, and this, I know last week, was it last week you were talking a bit about business models? Or is that coming next week? Business models? Next week? Some of you might realize, of course, that technically, internet users, like you and me when we go Google stuff, are not Google's customers. Who are Google's actual customers? Yeah. Who pays the bills? Advertisers. So we need one for them too. Google is the world's largest search engine that automatically provides advertisers with potential customers tailored to the ad content, increasing click-through rates and conversion rates. So what is it? It's still a search engine, but for whom? This time we're actually talking about the people who pay the bills, advertisers. The values there are it's automatic, it's customized, it increases conversion rates and click-through rates, which is a little jargony. Those translate into increased sales, more money. Okay. When we talk about value and values, to emphasize what I was mentioning before, we're not talking about features and things. We're talking about descriptors of value that makes people's lives better. So let me give you some examples, and there's more here. And I would really encourage you to pick out the values you think apply to your product. And again, you might have more that aren't on this list, but here's a quick rundown. In a business setting, if we were in business school right now, and we talked about the value of an economic exchange, usually we would come up with first saving or making money, because there's got to be some monetary benefit there. And saving time is a close second, because at least in Western countries, time equals money. It's a metaphor everybody gets and everybody knows painfully well. But that's just scratching the surface. There are so many other values that you can sell things on, and so many different values that resonate with different people. An enabling function is something where if you sell a product that enables somebody to do something else, right? If I was up all night because my daughter had a nightmare and I didn't get any sleep, which is actually true, and I had a really large coffee this morning, that caffeine enables me to stay awake at work and enables me to do my job better, right? So you're enabling other people to do other things. Convenience is a great one. I went to the closest coffee shop to me because I didn't want to wait for the best coffee in the city. I just needed coffee. Convenience is a big, big one. A coffee chain like Tim Hortons, that's one of their core values, is there's one within 5 minutes of you, no matter where you are. It's a big piece of what they do. Quality is also a big value seller. Starbucks, although they are everywhere as well on the convenience side, they don't, if we're talking about saving or making money, they don't sell their stuff as the cheapest coffee around. They sell it as good coffee, and they have, the ambience of the place is such that you feel like you're in a pretty nice establishment. So there's a difference in values there of what they're selling. They're selling the quality of the store, the cafe, and they're selling the quality of the product. Customization, customizable. A friend of mine has a company called Jellaskins, and they make skins for your phone and your laptops, stickers. And it's cool to have stuff, like they have partnerships with graffiti artists and artists all over the world. You can get really nice stuff. But the thing that sells the most on their sites are pictures you upload, and you can print one off of your own kids or your own logo, your own company logo. If you go into a meeting, you can have your logo right there on your laptop. So there's a customizable feature. Usability, right, makes Apple famous, right? The usability of it. My wife, first of all, would be mortified if she knew I was talking about her, but she doesn't have a cell phone. And I was doing this presentation, this was last year, I was doing this presentation at home, and I was explaining to her the usability of Apple. And she's played with my iPhone a few times, and she's like, I do not find it usable. I can't find anything on that phone. And so I started thinking about everything's relative. Apple's are, an iPhone is perhaps more usable than a comparator in their market. But when we're talking about usability, think of a really core technology like a pencil or a book. A book is so usable. It takes just one action to be working with the content. You just open it, right? It's so usable. It's so user-friendly. It's one of the reasons they've been around for 600 years. Lower risk is a big one, right? This is why you often see kind of money-back guarantees tagged to things, because if you can mitigate that person's risk, they feel better about buying, and they value that. They value the fact that they can change their mind later and get their money back. Health. It's one of those things like when you're sitting around for Christmas or holidays, and you cheers to your family, you say, what's more valuable than health? Nothing, right? And it's amazing. We did workshops with a whole bunch of life sciences and medical science entrepreneurs, and we were brainstorming values. What's the value of your thing? And it took a long time to get to health. That's the core of what they do, and it's the core of what many people do. If you can bring health to people, that's something that people will pay for and something that people value. It's incredibly important. It's the most important thing. Aesthetics. Forget saving time or saving money. People will pay a lot of money for things that they think look good. Things that other people think don't look good, but they love it for some reason. It speaks to them, right? They just think it's beautiful, so they pay for it. It's a value. Newness. This is a weird one where some people value something just because they're the first one to have it or because it's brand new. These are the people who will sleep on sidewalks to get the first Apple phone. And for them, that's really important. It's something they'll pay for and something they value. They value being the first. These are the early adopters, right? They sit right on the left-hand side of a nice bell curve that describes a market. They're the first people in, and they'll pay for that privilege. These are two that perhaps wouldn't have even been on this slide 30 or 40 years ago. The value of environmental products. If you go to a grocery store and buy the green version, some people will pay twice as much because it's the environmental version, it's the green version. And I'm really cynical about this, but a lot of companies just make things green and charge more, and people buy it, even though there might not be any reality to them selling that value. But it's something that people do definitely value. It doesn't have anything to do with saving money or saving time. It has to do with people's internal value systems. And if you understand that about your customers, then you've really got enough customer empathy to earn the right to start selling things to them. Ethical is a similar one, fair trade coffee, right? Bullfrog power, that's environmental, I guess. These are things that people will pay for that fair trade coffee stamp and know that they're not going to save money. In fact, they're going to spend more money. These last two speak to kind of deep kind of social and psychological values. One is social inclusion, which is, in a way, the value of Facebook. You don't get left out of those group conversations and those friend conversations. And up on the left is a piece on what we call self-actualization, which is, Eric Ries has this great little anecdote he tells, and he talks about somebody who is getting better and better and better at playing the oboe. And they will stay at home on a Friday night and practice the oboe and play the oboe, and they're getting pretty good at it. And they love that they're getting better at it, so they practice it more. Right? We've all got hobbies and things we do that don't make any sense financially. It's certainly not saving this person time. But it's something innate in us that we need to get better at things like. And so, you know, it certainly doesn't make any rational economic sense, but it makes you feel like you are achieving something as a person. So we do it, and we pay to do those things. This is an incomplete list of some of the values that you plop right in there into that sentence. Right in that sentence to describe what you're bringing to people. We can make you happy. We can make you healthy. We can save you time. We can make you money. These are all things that resonate with people instead of describing features. As a very loose taxonomy here, I'm going to split this up in two ways. On the right-hand side of this slide, some of these are what we might call overt values. You can describe them. You can often quantify them, most of them. You can describe them in numbers. You can talk about them at a business meeting. These are generally the values we use in what we call B2B sales, business to business, when you're selling to another business. Right? You want to say, we can enable your assembly line to move 8% faster. Or we can increase conversion rates of your emails by 5%. Or we can save you money, or we can save you time, or we can customize that desktop for you. On the left, these are values that are a little more innate and are harder for people to describe, and are generally the things that kind of mass market advertising sells to when stuff goes direct to a consumer. The stuff that you would buy on the shelves of a store. And they're a little harder to describe, right? People can't exactly tell you why they want to be the first person to buy an iPhone or why they bought that crystal vase. I just liked it, or I needed to have it. These are kind of more innate needs and innate values that you can tap into. If you remember one thing from this lecture, or if you have a phone and want one picture that sums up the whole thing, this is the slide. This is a template that I use with some of my clients here at Mars that we use, that's in that workbook, that appears in a number of different books, business strategy books. The actual kind of format of those fill-in-the-blanks might look a little different from book to book, but this is basically those three things I talked about in a sentence. So, company name has created a blank. Not the name of the product, but what the product is. What's the thing? And don't try and describe everything you do. Just be as specific as possible. What's the core thing? What's the core offering? For blank, so for a target market. And target markets need to see themselves in that sentence. They need to be like, this is for me. I'm right there. Look, I'm a vice president of human resources at a mid-sized company. This is for me. They need to see it. Otherwise, they'll gloss over it. They'll say, OK, that's interesting, but what else you got? That results in, or that allows you to, I like to pick 3 values. Pick between 2 and 4. Don't list 12, because people will tune out. Those 3 things you list should be the 3 things that are most important to that person, the VP of HR. And you get to know that through your interviews and through talking to those people. What do they value as people? And how can you work that right into your value proposition? So I wish I was doing this lecture in 3 weeks, because this book is coming out next week. And it's by a guy named Alex Osterwalder, who is the guy behind this template. Have you seen this before? Yes, I think Nathan talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, great. So this is one of the key tools we use here at Mars, and people all over the world use it to map out their business model. And you'll notice the heart of this template, the keystone of it, is the value proposition. Right? That's that central rectangle there. It really is the core of any business, and it needs to be in place before you kind of try and test into the other things. So Osterwalder has a nice little, what he calls a value proposition canvas that plugs into this, and it plugs in this way. You'll notice, here, let me go back here. The middle block is value proposition, and the block on the far right is customer segments. So what he's done is he's created this whole other book just on those two boxes. How do you make sure that the value proposition you're proposing fits with that customer segment? I'm going to go through that very quickly right now. So here are the two sides. You've got your customer on the right and your value proposition on the left. The first thing you can do is map out the customer jobs. Now what he means by that is, what is the person trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? These can be functional jobs, like, like trying to organize my mailing list. It can be a functional job like, I need to process 60 cans of paint through this assembly line every hour. Or they can be kind of social and emotional jobs to do. I want my boss to like me. Things that are outside of the realm of quantifiable, spreadsheets. The next thing you map out is what kind of pain points, you've often heard this, it's very dramatic, this language of business. What kind of pain does that person feel when they're doing their job? This can be frustration. This can be annoyances. This can be barriers in their way. This can be things that take too long. This can be things that cost too much. Anything that causes that person stress. When this person, it really is an exercise. Actually, he has an activity in his first book called the Customer Empathy Map, or the Customer Empathy Profile. And it really is empathy. If you are that person and you're lying in bed in the middle of the night, what keeps you up? What are you afraid of? When you go back to work the next day, what keeps them up at night? Similarly, what does that person dream about? If that person could do their job perfectly, what are their aspirations? What are their goals? What kind of gains could be brought from that position in that job? All right? What's the position above them that they're trying to get into? Once you've mapped out who the customer is and how this stuff fits in, what we want to do is we want to go back and we want to start mapping what we've got to their needs. So the first thing is you list all your products and services, and you rank them based on their needs, not which ones you like the best, but which ones are most useful to those people. And then the next thing is you start talking about your pain relievers, right? Pain relievers are things that make those pains go away. I can make that process less painful for you. It will cost less. This barrier will be out of your way. You can process twice as many things in that hour, and you don't need to worry about quality control. How can you make their lives better? Then the last piece is, how can you help them reach their aspirational goals? How can you help them achieve their dreams? How can you make them look good at work? If that person walks in and they use your product, and their boss is like, yeah, now you got it. This is amazing. There's an economic benefit, perhaps, for that person, but there's a really deep-seated psychological benefit there, too. Once these things are mapped out, of course, they fit in your they fit in your business model canvas, and then you try and figure out the other things like, how do I deliver that value? What channels? Am I going to put this online? Am I going to put it on the shelves at Walmart? Am I going to do direct sales? How do I get it out to them? And so on. You build up the logic of your whole business around these two core pieces, how your value maps to the people you're selling to. I want to close off here and just give you some use cases for the value proposition in marketing. So a value proposition is not any of these other things. It informs them, it helps you create them, but they're distinct. So this is a really quick overview, and this is not exactly a marketing lecture, but I just want to show you where these things come from. The value proposition is the core of all of them. And to use my initial metaphor of the scientific method, the value proposition is your core thesis, and then all these other kind of artifacts are for the purposes of marketing. And by marketing, I don't just mean selling more stuff. I also mean validating that core thesis or invalidating that core thesis. So you can think of marketing as any external communication with the outside world that kind of brings to, that explains to them what you are doing. And they're all fit for a different kind of purpose. So let's start with the elevator pitch. This is one that takes so much practice to make it sound like you haven't practiced it. When you hear people do this really well at a conference or something, it's an art form. And I'm going to take you through just a couple of little tips on how to do that. So this is kind of my outline of a good elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is generally a kind of 60-second summary of what it is that you do. It's an answer to the question, at a conference, so what do you do, or what are you working on these days? We have done events here, well, not here, but Mars has put on events at the CN Tower where literally we put an entrepreneur and an investor in an elevator, and then they have 90 seconds to pitch the product until the elevator gets to the top of the CN Tower. And then the entrepreneur gets off, somebody else gets on, and they do that all day. So the literal elevator pitch. I'm going to take you through this logic right here, and you'll see that the value proposition is the core piece of this elevator pitch. So we have to have a hook at the beginning to get people's attention. It's something that's a little weird, it's a little different, it's maybe funny, but not like, a 2-minute joke funny. I buy dead magazines is a great answer to that question, what do you do? Because then people are going to go, what do you mean by that? Like, huh? That's weird. One of the companies that I started 2007, the Treehouse Group, I would say this, we make conferences not boring. And people were often like, you said that wrong, because the grammar's off, and they want to know what I mean by that. We sell 15-minute vacations is another great one. So the answer to what do you mean is an opening to explain the problem you're solving. And ideally, this problem should be something they experience or can empathize with. So for I Buy Dead magazines, the problem is, well, paper-based magazines are dying. And then you go on and explain how you're going to solve that problem. Conferences are usually based on one-way lectures. And I'm acutely aware of the irony right now on this, by the way. We sell 15-minute vacations. Well, people's commute to work is really stressful, blah, blah, blah. And you start to say, yeah, there's this problem, and we've kind of figured out a value that solves this problem for people. Once you've explained what the problem is, well, print magazines are dying. So what we do is we buy up print magazines that are failing and reinvent them on the web. So for traditional small magazine publishers, my company Solid Media provides an online template called DigiPub, which repurposes their print materials for online consumption at a low cost, and then repurposes that content to a new crop of advertisers. Hidden in that paragraph is the value proposition. Here are the 3 pieces. What is it? It's an online template called DigiPub. It's an online template for whom? Magazine publishers, traditional magazine publishers, paper ones. What are the values? It repurposes existing material. It's low cost, and it opens you up to new advertisers. The solution, ideally, people should be like, oh, okay, that's cool. You ideally want them to be like, tell me a little bit more about that. So here is where you want to explain how you're different from some of the other stuff they might heard of. At this point, they've put you in a category in their head. So they're like, okay, that's just like WordPress or Kobo or I don't know, there's a bunch of magazine publishing templates online these days. They've put you in a category, which is OK. That's good. It means you're in their brains. The next step is to go in their brains and take it out of that category and put it just beside it so that they think, ah, it's like WordPress, but it's got this unique feature I haven't heard of yet. So we add these e-magazines metadata into our recommendation engine, which is kind of like how Amazon recommends, or Netflix, you could say, which brings in new readers that you wouldn't have had before. And they're like, oh, that's new. That's a different piece that isn't new. A good pitch, a good elevator pitch always ends with a call to action. You want them to do something. So good idea. Well, we're signing up beta customers now. Why don't you go to the website, play around with it, see what you think. Here's my business card. So the value proposition is a setup to a call to action. And that way, you can keep people engaged. Let's talk about positioning. This is a little bit what I was just talking about in terms of marketing. A positioning statement is a value proposition plus what we call an unlike statement. So the value proposition is the same as before. Whoops. But that last sentence on the end is an unlike statement. So unlike Press Publisher 4.0, Digipubs adds your metadata to your content, connecting you with new readers and new advertisers. Or if they're like, oh, that sounds like kind of like WordPress, you could say, well, unlike WordPress, Digipub is just for magazine publishers alone to repurpose their content and to find new readers. So this is, and if you can't answer that question, unlike, you got some homework to do, right? Because if people put you in a category and you can't get out of that category or sit just beside it and emphasize how you're different, it's not enough to make a sale. The metaphor, I think, is one of the strongest ways to explain the value of what you've got in as few as words as possible. I've done things with people where I challenge them to come up with a metaphor and tweet it out and see how many RTs or likes they can get for people who understand what it is exactly they do. So the metaphor is, or a simile, is what you remember it to be, which is you find a comparator that stands in for a lot of the values. So Digipub is like Shopify for magazines. Does anybody know what Shopify is? A few of you? If I know that about the audience, I won't go there because it's a useless metaphor, right? If people don't know what it is. So you could go for something that more people know. Digipub is like the magazine industry what Kobo is for books. Or Digipub is like WordPress just for magazines. Or the mixed metaphor. Digipub combines the metadata from Amazon with templates in WordPress specifically for magazine publishers. So you're using what they already know as a shorthand for value. And this can be remarkably powerful to get your hook in. I've heard people use that as their opening hook in their elevator pitch, combining two things that are kind of unlike. There's a company here, and literally I heard him say this in the elevator. Somebody asked him what he was working on, and he said the name of his company. And the guy said, well, so what do you do? And he said, it's like eBay for home contracting, right? They get contractors to bid on it. You post a job, contractors bid on it, and then you choose the one you want, right? That 5 words, 4 words, is a really powerful way of a shorthand for value. The tagline. This exists just in the world of marketing, and it's the kind of what comes after the colon. Digipub, reimagine your magazine. Print is dead, long live print. Follow your readers online. Bits are cheaper than pages. Where magazines live online. So what I would do at this point is I would do what we call A/B tests. If, after all my intense conference networking, I have a mailing list of 100 people who at least kind of want to know what I'm working on, or at least maybe take a peek at my beta, I would send them emails with these in the subject line. But I would send 50 emails with the first subject line, and 50 emails with a second subject line, and I would count who gives me the best hit rate. I would get them to tell me which tagline they like and which one resonates with them. I wouldn't assume I knew, because that's not how the scientific process works. We have a thesis, we go test it, we look at the data, and then we make a decision to move forward. The last one here is the mission statement. And this is a really, really broad, kind of goal-oriented way of describing your company. So this doesn't describe any product or any service that you have. It just describes the purpose of your existence as a company. This can be blue sky thinky, right? This doesn't have to be practical and clear. This can be out in the universe thinking. Google, this is real, I think. Yes, Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. It doesn't say how they're going to do that. In fact, they have hundreds of ways of doing that. Or they're testing hundreds of ways of doing that. But they've got their lofty ambition of why they exist. Facebook's mission is to give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected. More open, I don't know about that, but that's their mission statement. Solid Media's mission is to connect curious readers to the very best written content on the web. So that's my invention about my magazine platform. So all of these examples of kind of what we might call marketing artifacts, things that you use for different purposes and different audiences, they all come from that one sentence, that value proposition. They all have their root there. I would, if you come up with the value proposition you're testing, write it on your wall. If you're working with more than one people, all the emails you send, all the people you talk to should include those words in some form. If 3 different people ask the 3 different co-founders of a company, what do? You should all answer the exact same thing because you're aligned on what the value is that you're bringing to people. Now, the frustrating thing is that it might change from week to week or month to month, but you should all be aligned with those changes and say we're no longer going to talk about cost as a value factor here because our customers are telling us that cost, saving a few pennies on a coffee, does not actually matter. What does matter to them is quality, and we're going to start talking about quality. Or we're going to start talking about the convenience of it instead of the low cost of it. Almost every startup puts low cost in their value proposition, or cheap. But not that many things are sold by virtue of the fact that they're cheap. Like there's so many other values you can tap into here. So I would encourage you to use that template, fill in the blanks, move the blanks around until you get a sentence that works and that you can start to talk to people, and then go out and test it, because that's really the only way that you're going to understand exactly what your customers truly value. Thanks.
Hi, first of all, I just wanted to say thanks. It was really easy to follow your talk, and the pace you took it was excellent. So, and the examples you used as well, I just really enjoyed it. I have 2 questions. And what if you're doing something in a category that doesn't have a competitor, and then you don't have an unlike statement? So the example you used was Digipub and said, you know, it's like a WordPress for this, but unlike WordPress, this is what we do. What if that example doesn't apply? There isn't anything like it for you to say unlike.
Often when we talk about competitors and when we talk about unlike, it doesn't have to be what we call a direct competitor in your space. What you can often say unlike is unlike whatever they're doing is the status quo. However they're solving that problem now, that's who you want to compare yourself to. So you could say, unlike traditional methods of publishing magazines, and then list the values in reference to that. There's a great book called Blue Ocean Strategy. Does anybody know that book, Blue Ocean? The idea of the blue ocean means you've found a space where there are no competitors. And the classic example for this in the book is Cirque du Soleil, right? Because they reinvented the circus in a space where there was nobody competing with them. Now, that's not the case now, right? There's lots of people who are like, we have like RD Circus too, like we can do that too. But certainly when they came around, there was no competitor. And so what they did was they said, instead of unlike regular circuses, they would compare themselves and have as their comparators dinner shows, movies. Basically, a competitor was any other person that could take your dollars on a Friday night out. It wasn't just people who were direct with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so one of the hardest things I've found to answer after you've built a like a value proposition. Again, I'm going to use your Digipub example. Was what if blank started doing this? Then you'd be crushed. So like for the Digipub example, it'd be what if Kobo started to do a magazine publishing platform? Then
right.
what? Then you know there's no point in your product because there's a bigger company doing it. So I found that really hard to answer all the time. So what about that?
Well, I mean, a lot of investors will say that, you know, to start, especially a technology business, there should be some core intellectual property, some technological magic that you have that you can't share with people. Otherwise, it's just a race for marketing and a race for dollars, which of course you can't win against somebody like Kobo. There's a couple of answers to that I've heard, and you'd have to, again, test this on people, see if they go, yeah, right, or see if they go, oh, that's good. One is a startup and small companies really do have an advantage in the speed at which they can course correct and the nimbleness in which they can adapt to markets. So if Kobo invests money in a particular technological solution, a platform, they're locked into that for like a year or two, right? If it's you and 3 guys, you can switch over from a downloadable app to a HTML5 version to another version within weeks, hopefully, or maybe months. But you can move quicker. It's one thing. The second thing, and this is the answer I like, is that you should be able to show that you are really super, super focused on a core group of users in a niche market. So, and it's not to say that when you emerge for that niche market, you won't have other markets to go for, but by then the market has changed and you might have a different product or a different value proposition. So to show that you are super concerned with a core group of users that have a particular problem. So it might be like sports magazines. And you can be like, everything we do, the user interface is focused on sports readers. Sports readers read differently than current affairs readers or music magazine readers. Sports readers do this, this, and this differently. They have they have a higher rate of loyalty. They have a lower rate of brand switching. I don't know. I'm making all this up.
To them best.
That's right. So you say I don't care about the mass market now. Right now we're focusing on sports magazines, and nobody does that better than we do.
Thank you.
All right. Joe, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. Joe will be around to answer questions if you have any. Have a good evening.
Thanks.